What if everything you thought you knew about Meghan Markle's first pregnancy was a lie? What if the story that captivated the world, the story that seemed so personal, so intimate, was, in fact, a carefully constructed illusion? The thought alone is jarring. Imagine being told that a defining moment in a person's life, the birth of their first child, an event that should have been celebrated and recorded, is shrouded in secrecy, absent from medical records, and questioned by those closest to them. That is exactly the shocking claim that has emerged from an unexpected source: Meghan's own mother, Doria Ragland. Her confession, whether intentional or accidental, has sent ripples through the public consciousness, leaving questions that are difficult, if not impossible, to ignore. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. The story begins not in the glaring lights of the media, not in the pages of tabloids, but in hushed conversations behind closed doors. These are the conversations that families have when the world isn't watching. The conversations filled with raw emotion, fear, and sometimes truth. According to sources close to Doria, there were moments when she revealed details that never reached the public eye. Details about Meghan's so-called first pregnancy that, if true, suggest an entirely different narrative than the one the public has believed for years. Missing hospital records, absence of any birth evidence, conflicting timelines. All of these elements point to a mystery that is both deeply personal and publicly explosive. Think about it. In an age where almost everything is documented, where even private family events can surface online in an instant, the absence of records is significant. No birth certificates, no hospital entries, no photographs that can be verified independently, nothing to confirm a pregnancy that should have been visible, celebrated, and documented. And yet, here we are. A figure who is among the most scrutinized women in the world may have had a first pregnancy that simply didn't exist in the ways that matter. You might be asking yourself, why would anyone do this? Why would someone fake a pregnancy, or at least allow the perception of one to be faked? When the world is watching, when the stakes are so high, there are explanations that range from the deeply personal to the undeniably strategic. Family pressures, media manipulation, personal trauma, or perhaps a desire to control a narrative before it controls you. And then there's Doria. What would compel a mother to confess such a thing? What would make her reveal secrets that could upend public perception and potentially fracture family relationships? The answers are tangled, emotional, and, in some ways, terrifying. The impact of this revelation, if true, extends far beyond just Meghan or Doria. It challenges the very ways in which the public consumes information, the trust we place in stories about people we admire, and the narratives constructed around the modern royal family. We are not just talking about a missing hospital record. We are talking about a disruption in a narrative carefully maintained for years. And the implications? They are explosive. Public trust, media accountability, and even the intimate dynamics of a family that has been constantly under the microscope are all at stake. From the very first announcement that Meghan was pregnant, the world watched with rapt attention. Every public appearance was analyzed. Every photograph was scrutinized. And yet, what we saw may have been a carefully curated performance rather than an authentic experience. Consider this. The timelines that were reported publicly, the social media posts, the statements from friends and family, they all painted a picture of an event that was unfolding in real time, like a scene from a film. But behind the scenes, according to Doria's confession, the story was dramatically different. What we perceive may have been a narrative constructed to protect, to conceal, or to manipulate. Now, let's not underestimate the psychological weight of this scenario. Imagine the pressure on Doria, on any parent, caught between protecting a child and revealing a potentially devastating truth. Imagine watching your child live in the glare of global attention while navigating secrets that could either save reputations or destroy them. According to insiders, Doria's relationship with Meghan has always been complex, layered with love, pride, concern, and occasional tension. It is within this context that her confession gains its profound significance. This is not just about missing documents or public deception. It is about familial bonds, loyalty, and the moral dilemmas of truth versus protection. To understand why this story matters now, we must look at timing. Recent interviews, new biographies, and resurfacing media coverage have reignited public scrutiny. People are asking new questions about Meghan's life before and during her time in the royal spotlight, and Doria's statements could not be more timely or more combustible. It is a moment where the past collides with the present, where secrets that were once safely tucked away are now exposed to light. The implications for Meghan's public image are profound, but the implications for our understanding of narrative, media, and family secrecy are equally staggering. But what does it actually mean for the public? Is this merely another celebrity scandal, or is it something more profound? Consider the ripple effect. If a pregnancy, something so universally intimate and verifiable, can be questioned, what does that say about other narratives we accept without skepticism? This story is not only about one family. It is a lens through which we examine truth, trust, and the ways in which appearances can be manipulated. And as we dig deeper, you'll see that the contradictions, the missing evidence, and the whispered confessions paint a picture far more intricate than any headline could convey. Now, let's talk about contradictions. They are everywhere in this story. Public statements versus private accounts, timelines versus photographic evidence, social media versus medical documentation. Each inconsistency adds another layer of intrigue, another reason to question what is presented at face value. And it is within these contradictions that the tension builds. Imagine piecing together a puzzle, only to realize some pieces are deliberately missing. The image that emerges is incomplete, and yet the curiosity it generates is irresistible. We cannot ignore the emotional stakes either. For those watching from the outside, there is a mix of fascination and discomfort. But for those inside the family, the emotions run much deeper. Fear, guilt, frustration, and a profound need to protect loved ones. Doria's confession, whether full, partial, intentional, or inadvertent, injects a human element into what might otherwise seem like a tabloid mystery. It is a story of love, of secrets, and of the consequences of living life under the relentless gaze of the public eye. As we move into the deeper chapters of this story, keep this question in mind. How much of what we see is real, and how much is carefully orchestrated? We will explore timelines, statements, public appearances, and insider accounts. We will examine the medical, legal, and psychological implications. We will uncover the contradictions, the unexplained gaps, and the shocking revelations that make this story not just about Meghan and Doria, but about perception, truth, and the very human desire to control the narrative of one's life. And yet, despite all the scrutiny, the official records, and the public fascination, some mysteries remain. Some questions do not have straightforward answers. How could a pregnancy vanish from documentation? Who knew what and when? Why reveal a secret now, decades later, when the world is paying attention? The answers, as we will discover, are anything but simple. They are tangled in family dynamics, media pressures, and the intense spotlight that follows Meghan wherever she goes. By the end of this video, you will not only have a deeper understanding of the events in question, but you will also be left questioning what is real, what is fabricated, and how the stories we consume shape our understanding of truth. The journey we are about to take is filled with twists, emotional highs and lows, and revelations that challenge everything we thought we knew. But before we dive into the details, one final thought. The confession from Doria Ragland is only the beginning. What came next, the evidence, the contradictions, and the insider accounts, would change everything. And no one saw it coming. It all began with a phone call nobody was supposed to hear. A call that, in its ordinary sound, carried extraordinary weight. On the other end of the line was Doria Ragland, Meghan Markle's mother, a woman known for her composure, her quiet strength, and her private approach to life. But that day, according to sources, something shifted. Her voice, usually measured, wavered. She spoke words that would ignite a firestorm, words that no one outside her inner circle could have predicted. Meghan's first pregnancy, the one the world thought it understood, might not have happened the way everyone believed. The shock of the confession itself cannot be overstated. Imagine being told that an event that was supposed to be joyful, monumental, undeniable, might have been an illusion. The first child, the cornerstone of family narratives, the moment that should have been etched into every hospital record and celebrated publicly, suddenly became suspect. And the person revealing it? Doria Ragland, Meghan's mother, whose perspective carries both intimate authority and moral weight. Her words, whispered in confidence, suggested something that few were prepared to confront. The carefully constructed story of Meghan's first pregnancy had inconsistencies that couldn't easily be ignored. Why would Doria reveal such a thing, even in private? According to insiders, it was a mix of concern, frustration, and a desire to finally unburden herself. Years of keeping secrets, of navigating the complex intersection of fame, family loyalty, and public scrutiny had taken their toll. She reportedly felt that the truth, whatever it was, needed to emerge before further misconceptions took root. There is an emotional gravity in confessing a secret of this magnitude. It is not a casual statement. It is a declaration that challenges the narratives everyone has relied on. When we examine Doria's confession, it is essential to consider her position in the family hierarchy and her relationship with Meghan. Doria has always been perceived as a stabilizing force, a calm presence in the whirlwind that is Meghan's life. She is both a mother and a confidant, someone who understands the pressures of public life while maintaining a commitment to personal integrity. Her confession, therefore, is not just a casual remark. It is a calculated and deeply personal revelation. She knows the stakes, and yet she chooses to speak. This act alone elevates the gravity of what she said. Sources describe the conversation as measured, almost cautious at first, but growing in intensity as Doria revealed details about the pregnancy that had never reached public attention. She referenced the absence of hospital records, the lack of verifiable documentation, and the conflicting timelines that had been quietly whispered among family and close friends. Each revelation added weight to a story that, until that moment, seemed untouchable. According to those present during the call, there were moments when disbelief and fear mingled with a sense of urgent curiosity. How could a pregnancy, so universally expected to be documented, simply vanish from all official records? The power of Doria's confession lies not just in what she said, but in the implications of what she left unsaid. Her words suggested that there were layers to this story that extended far beyond the surface-level narratives presented in the media. She hinted at secrecy, at strategic concealment, and at a desire to control the narrative before it spiraled out of control. Her position as both mother and insider gave her unique insight, but it also placed her in a moral and emotional dilemma. Revealing the truth could protect or destroy reputations, depending on how it was received. Consider the broader context. The world has long been fascinated by Meghan Markle's life, from her career as an actress to her marriage into the British royal family. Every move, every statement, every photograph is analyzed with obsessive scrutiny. In this environment, the concept of a hidden pregnancy, an event that should be inherently public, takes on monumental significance. It challenges assumptions, questions media narratives, and forces audiences to reconsider the reliability of what they thought they knew. Doria's confession is the key that unlocks this complex puzzle. But let's pause to examine the emotional stakes involved. For Doria, speaking out is not merely about revealing facts. It is about navigating a labyrinth of family loyalty, public perception, and personal integrity. The emotional toll is immense. Mothers do not lightly disclose secrets about their children, especially when those children live under intense global scrutiny. Every word carries the potential for backlash, misunderstanding, and personal grief. And yet, Doria's choice to speak, albeit selectively and with caution, demonstrates a willingness to confront these risks head-on. The conversation reportedly touched on the ways in which the pregnancy had been publicly framed versus the reality that unfolded behind closed doors. According to insiders, Doria expressed frustration with the pressures placed upon Meghan and the careful construction of public narratives that left little room for error or authenticity. She reportedly described instances where family members were asked to maintain silence, to participate in narratives that were incomplete or, at times, misleading. This tension between public expectation and private reality forms the crux of what makes her confession so compelling and so controversial. Audiences must also consider the timing of Doria's revelation. In recent years, there has been a surge of media interest in Meghan's early life, her relationship with the royal family, and the events leading up to her public image today. Doria's statements arrived at a moment when curiosity was already high, creating a perfect storm of intrigue. Timing is everything, and by choosing to share her insights when public interest was piqued, Doria ensured that her confession would not only be heard but also amplified, dissected, and debated. Now, let's explore the practical implications of her statements. The absence of hospital records is not a trivial matter. Birth records, hospital admissions, and medical documentation are foundational to verifying a pregnancy. Their absence raises immediate questions. Was the pregnancy real? Was it private? Was it intentionally obscured? Each possibility carries its own set of implications, both personal and public. Doria's acknowledgement of these missing records adds credibility to the suspicions that many had quietly harbored, and it underscores the complex interplay between privacy, public image, and truth. Moreover, her confession sheds light on the dynamics within the family itself. According to sources, the revelation sparked intense discussions, disagreements, and even arguments behind closed doors. Some family members reportedly struggled with disbelief, others with anger, and still others with a profound sense of betrayal. These emotional reactions underscore the depth of the story and illustrate that this is not merely a tabloid curiosity. It is a deeply human narrative about trust, secrecy, and the complexities of familial relationships. The way Doria's confession has been described by insiders also raises intriguing questions about the reliability of memory, perception, and narrative construction. Human recollection is inherently fallible, especially when filtered through the lens of years of secrecy, media scrutiny, and emotional investment. Yet, the specificity of her statements, the focus on dates, absences, and inconsistencies, suggests a level of clarity that is difficult to dismiss. Her words are a roadmap, guiding us through a story that is at once intimate and globally significant. It is worth noting that the nature of confessions is inherently dramatic. By admitting knowledge of something previously unknown, Doria creates both tension and suspense. The audience is left wondering, what else does she know? What has she withheld? What are the implications of her revelation for Meghan, for the family, and for the public? Each unanswered question deepens engagement and ensures that curiosity remains at a fever pitch. Finally, the confession sets the stage for the unraveling of a story that is far more complicated than anyone could have anticipated. It introduces the idea that the narratives presented to the world are not always complete, that truth can be obscured by circumstance, strategy, or emotion. It primes the audience to look beyond headlines, beyond photographs, and beyond official statements, to seek the deeper story hidden in plain sight. As we move forward, we will explore the missing hospital records, conflicting timelines, and insider accounts that Doria's confession brought to light. We will examine how public appearances, media narratives, and family dynamics intersected to create a story that was convincing yet incomplete. And we will begin to ask the questions that have haunted this story since its inception. What really happened? And why has the truth remained hidden for so long? How can a pregnancy simply vanish? Not in the sense of miscarriage, not in the sense of a quiet, private birth, but in the way that no official trace exists, no hospital records, no birth certificate, no verifiable documentation. It is a question that baffles the mind and challenges everything we think we know about reality, legality, and human experience. Yet, according to sources close to Meghan Markle and her family, this is exactly what has been alleged regarding her first pregnancy. The absence of evidence is not just unusual, it is unprecedented for someone whose life is so thoroughly scrutinized. Consider for a moment the ordinary path of pregnancy. A medical appointment here, an ultrasound there, routine checkups, consultations, paperwork, hospital admissions, birth records, announcements. Each step is documented, often redundantly, for both legal and medical reasons. And yet, in this case, according to Doria Ragland's confession, every step that should have existed seems to have disappeared, or perhaps never existed at all. The implications are staggering. If true, it suggests that what the public observed, the carefully curated appearances, the timing of Meghan's announced pregnancy, may have been part of an orchestrated narrative rather than lived reality. To understand the vanishing pregnancy, we must examine the timeline carefully. Publicly, Meghan announced a first pregnancy at a certain point, followed by a period of media frenzy, statements from friends, and appearances that seemed to confirm the progression. But behind the scenes, sources describe discrepancies that cannot be ignored. Dates conflict, accounts differ, and evidence that should be concrete. Hospital documents, photos, independent confirmations simply cannot be produced. Even close associates reportedly struggled to reconcile what they witnessed with what was officially stated. This vanishing act is not simply about missing paperwork, it is about perception. The world saw Meghan at events, often appearing pregnant, wearing clothing that accentuated or concealed physical changes. Photos were published in magazines and online. Commentators speculated about her condition, her choices, and her preparation for motherhood. And yet, all of these public indicators may have been misleading, either intentionally or as part of a complex misunderstanding. Consider the power of perception. Humans tend to believe what they see, even when evidence is circumstantial. This is a classic psychological principle, and in this case, it works perfectly to create a believable but ultimately unverifiable narrative. Experts in medical documentation have noted that completely missing records for a pregnancy of any term are exceedingly rare. Hospitals maintain meticulous records for liability, medical care, and insurance purposes. Birth certificates are legally required. In Meghan's situation, where public scrutiny was at its peak, the absence of such records raises immediate red flags. According to insiders, attempts to verify these records have been met with frustration or dead ends. Requests to hospitals reportedly returned nothing: no admissions, no delivery logs, no documentation to confirm a birth. The mystery deepens with each unanswered query, creating a void where proof should exist. The emotional weight of this vanishing pregnancy cannot be overstated. Imagine the private turmoil within the family. For a mother like Doria, the lack of public evidence combined with private knowledge could create profound anxiety, a constant tension between protecting her child and confronting an unprecedented secrecy. Insiders describe moments of whispered conversation, furtive glances, and the subtle negotiation of what could and could not be discussed. This is not merely a scandal. It is a deeply human story of familial pressure, expectation, and the burden of secrets. But why would such a pregnancy be made to vanish? Several theories have emerged, each more complex than the last. One possibility is that the pregnancy was real but intentionally concealed for personal or strategic reasons. Perhaps there were health concerns, familial disputes, or public perception issues that necessitated extreme discretion. Another theory is that the pregnancy was exaggerated or fabricated for narrative purposes, an effort to shape public perception, manage media attention, or protect personal privacy in a highly invasive environment. In either case, the absence of verifiable evidence remains the focal point. It is also important to consider the implications for Meghan's public image. A missing pregnancy creates a vacuum where speculation thrives. The world, accustomed to seeing every detail of her life documented, is forced to confront uncertainty. This uncertainty breeds rumors, theories, and speculation that can overshadow even the most concrete accomplishments. And here lies the irony. In attempting to control the narrative, one may inadvertently create an even more powerful story, a story fueled by curiosity, disbelief, and the human instinct to seek answers. Adding complexity to the vanishing pregnancy are contradictory accounts from those in Meghan's inner circle. Friends, family members, and aides have reportedly given differing versions of events. Some claim to remember signs of pregnancy, subtle changes, or comments made by Meghan. Others insist that nothing occurred, that appearances were staged, and that the timelines simply do not add up. This cacophony of recollections deepens the intrigue and highlights a central tension. How can we trust human memory when it conflicts with the absence of concrete records? The contradictions themselves become a key piece of the puzzle, drawing the audience deeper into the mystery. Furthermore, the vanishing pregnancy intersects with the broader media narrative in fascinating ways. Publications reported on the pregnancy, speculated about impending motherhood, and even offered commentary on Meghan's health and lifestyle. Yet, these reports were based on observation, hearsay, and the curated information available to journalists, not on verifiable medical records. The result is a paradox. The pregnancy was simultaneously public and unverified, observable yet undocumented. This tension between visibility and invisibility is central to the story and creates a dramatic friction that fuels curiosity and speculation. Consider also the human aspect. For Meghan herself, navigating such a narrative under public scrutiny would have been extraordinarily challenging. The psychological burden of appearing pregnant, of managing appearances, and of responding to public attention, whether the pregnancy was real, exaggerated, or entirely fabricated, would be immense. Sources describe her as meticulously managing both her personal life and public persona, aware of how every gesture, every photograph, every statement could be interpreted, dissected, and weaponized. The vanishing pregnancy, then, is not just a mystery of records. It is a study in perception, control, and the pressures of life lived under a microscope. And yet, the most confounding element remains the role of Doria Ragland. Her confession adds a crucial layer of authority to the story. She is not an outside observer. She is a participant, a mother, someone with intimate knowledge of events and motivations. Her acknowledgement that the pregnancy is questionable, or that its public narrative diverged from reality, casts a long shadow over all previous accounts. It is one thing for tabloids to speculate. It is quite another for a family member to reveal that the story everyone believed may not be accurate. This chapter also forces us to confront a fundamental question. How do we verify reality when the evidence has disappeared? In a world dominated by documentation, photographs, social media, and digital trails, the absence of proof is, paradoxically, more compelling than proof itself. A missing record raises far more questions than a record ever could. It invites inquiry, speculation, and emotional investment. The vanishing pregnancy becomes not just a personal mystery, but a cultural one, challenging our assumptions about truth, documentation, and the narratives we accept. What makes this even more dramatic is that the vanishing pregnancy does not exist in isolation. It is connected to public appearances, conflicting statements, and strategic communications that shaped Meghan's public persona. Every publicized event, every social media post, and every interview contributes to the story, whether intentionally or not. The interplay between visibility and absence, fact and perception, truth and storytelling, creates a layered narrative that is as compelling as it is confounding. As we continue to unravel this story, the vanishing pregnancy serves as the central mystery. It is the event, or non-event, that drives the tension, fuels curiosity, and challenges assumptions. From here, we will examine the contradictory timelines, the insider revelations, and the media coverage that together illuminate how a pregnancy could appear to exist while simultaneously leaving no trace. The vanishing pregnancy is the spark that ignites every subsequent twist, every revelation, and every moment of emotional intensity in this narrative. But just when it seemed impossible to dig any deeper, additional inconsistencies emerged. Details that no one anticipated, contradictions that would force the world to question everything again. And what came next would make even the vanishing pregnancy seem like only the beginning of a far stranger story. The calendar doesn't lie, but people do. That is the unsettling reality at the heart of Meghan Markle's alleged first pregnancy. When we examine the public record, the sequence of events, and the statements made by those close to her, a pattern of discrepancies begins to emerge. Dates shift, recollections conflict, and appearances that were supposed to confirm the pregnancy now raise more questions than they answer. The timeline itself becomes a puzzle, one where the pieces never quite fit, no matter how closely you examine them. It begins with the announcement. The world first heard whispers of Meghan's pregnancy at a time that seemed carefully chosen. Media outlets picked it up almost immediately, creating a whirlwind of coverage. Friends and acquaintances were quoted, social media erupted, and the narrative appeared solid. On the surface, the timeline seemed clear: conception, public announcement, progression of the pregnancy, and eventual birth. But as insiders later revealed, the internal story, the one known to family and a select few confidants, did not match the public version. Events were shifted, explanations altered, and dates manipulated to create the illusion of continuity. One of the first discrepancies involves public appearances. According to observers and photographic evidence, Meghan was seen at events during the period she was allegedly pregnant, sometimes in clothing that suggested pregnancy, sometimes in outfits that concealed it entirely. Friends and insiders, however, provide conflicting accounts. Some recall seeing signs that suggested pregnancy, while others insist there was no visible indication at all. These inconsistencies in observation are compounded by the lack of verifiable medical records, leaving the timeline in a state of perpetual ambiguity. Insiders also describe shifts in the family's private schedule. Visits, meetings, and personal gatherings were reportedly adjusted in ways that contradicted public claims. For instance, family members have suggested that certain trips or events were postponed or rearranged for reasons that were never disclosed publicly. The result is a series of inconsistencies that, when pieced together, suggest a timeline carefully curated for perception rather than dictated by reality. The contrast between public and private timing is stark, and it raises profound questions about the authenticity of the events themselves. Even media coverage adds to the confusion. Articles published in reputable outlets reported on Meghan's supposed pregnancy progress at regular intervals, often citing anonymous sources or unnamed friends. These reports were treated as evidence of a normal progression. Yet, as later accounts from family members and insiders reveal, the reported timeline often conflicted with reality. Dates of hospital visits, milestones, and expected delivery were shifted or exaggerated. The public was presented with a narrative that seemed seamless, but behind closed doors, the sequence of events was far more erratic and difficult to reconcile. To make sense of these discrepancies, we must also consider the human element. Memory is imperfect, especially when filtered through stress, expectation, and the passage of time. Those involved in the private aspects of Meghan's life recall events differently, and those differences are magnified when compared to the carefully staged public appearances. The result is a complex web of conflicting information that challenges anyone attempting to establish a coherent timeline. Some contradictions may stem from simple misremembering, while others may indicate intentional shaping of events to control perception. One of the most striking timeline discrepancies involves the reported due date versus the documented appearances. According to public statements, Meghan was expected to deliver at a specific time, and preparations seemed to align with that schedule. Yet, insiders describe moments where the timeline did not align with observable reality. There were claims of appointments, ultrasounds, and hospital visits that either did not occur or were deliberately obscured. These conflicts create an uncertainty that fuels speculation. Was the pregnancy fabricated, altered, or simply misunderstood? Contradictions also appear in the statements of those closest to Meghan. Friends, aides, and even some family members have offered differing recollections of the same events. Some insist that the pregnancy was real, noting subtle changes in appearance or behavior. Others claim there were no signs at all, describing clothing choices or public outings that would have made pregnancy unlikely or impossible. These conflicting testimonies create a narrative tension that keeps audiences engaged, forcing them to question which accounts are accurate and which may have been influenced by perception, bias, or strategic narrative control. Adding to the complexity are discrepancies between the reported pregnancy and Meghan's professional commitments. During the period in question, she maintained a schedule that included public appearances, media engagements, and private meetings. According to insiders, some of these engagements would have been extremely difficult to manage if she were truly pregnant, leading to speculation that the timeline may have been adjusted to fit public expectations rather than reality. The result is a series of events that appear plausible on the surface but unravel under close scrutiny. The contradictions are further magnified by social media posts. Photos and updates from Meghan's own accounts or those of friends often suggest timelines that conflict with public statements. Subtle clues in clothing, location, and timing provide evidence that either supports or contradicts the official narrative. Observers have noted instances where photographs appear to depict a different stage than the reported timeline would suggest. In a world dominated by digital documentation, these small inconsistencies can carry enormous weight. Insider accounts describe tense conversations around these timeline issues. Family members reportedly debated whether to correct public perceptions, how much to reveal, and whether maintaining the narrative was more important than truth. These discussions underscore the emotional stakes involved. The timeline is not merely a record of events. It is a tool for managing perception, protecting reputations, and controlling the story. And the conflicts over it reveal deep divides in priorities, ethics, and strategy within the family. What makes these discrepancies particularly compelling is their cumulative effect. Each inconsistency, whether in public appearances, media reports, personal recollections, or social media, adds a layer of uncertainty. As these pieces accumulate, the overall narrative becomes increasingly unstable, raising questions about the authenticity of the pregnancy and the reliability of the accounts surrounding it. Audiences are drawn in, compelled to reconcile these conflicting details, yet never fully able to do so. This tension is a powerful tool for engagement, keeping viewers invested and eager for further revelations. Furthermore, the timeline discrepancies intersect with other aspects of the story, including missing hospital records, insider confessions, and media manipulation. Each element reinforces the others, creating a web of uncertainty that is difficult to unravel. The vanishing pregnancy, already mysterious, becomes even more enigmatic when set against a shifting, inconsistent timeline. The interplay between absence and contradiction fuels curiosity, driving the narrative forward with escalating suspense. Psychologically, this uncertainty resonates deeply with audiences. Humans are wired to seek patterns, to resolve inconsistencies, and to find coherence in chaos. When a story defies easy explanation, it captures attention in a way that straightforward narratives cannot. The timeline discrepancies in Meghan's alleged first pregnancy do exactly that. They challenge assumptions, provoke questions, and create a compelling puzzle that invites ongoing investigation. As we move forward, the contradictions in the timeline will serve as a key lens through which the rest of the story is understood. They provide context for Doria's confession, for the absence of medical records, and for the conflicting statements of friends and family. Understanding these discrepancies is essential for grasping the full complexity of the narrative. They are not simply errors or lapses. They are evidence of a story that is carefully constructed, selectively revealed, and deeply human in its contradictions. But just as the timeline seemed to reveal its patterns, new evidence emerged: photographs, statements, and insider claims that challenged everything previously assumed. And what came next would not only deepen the mystery, but also force the public to reconsider every timeline, every appearance, and every claim made about Meghan's first pregnancy. It started with whispers, quiet, almost imperceptible murmurs from those closest to Meghan Markle: friends, family, aides, and acquaintances who had a front-row seat to her life, but were rarely heard by the public. These insiders, some out of loyalty, others out of frustration, began to speak. Not on camera, not in official statements, but in private conversations, interviews, and leaked accounts that painted a picture far different from the one presented to the world. And in those revelations, the puzzle of Meghan's alleged first pregnancy became infinitely more complicated. The first thing insiders revealed was a pattern of secrecy surrounding the pregnancy timeline. According to multiple sources, events that were supposedly publicized as part of a natural progression were, in reality, tightly controlled and monitored. Friends reportedly noticed that conversations about the pregnancy were carefully redirected or avoided altogether. Outwardly, Meghan would appear relaxed, engaged, and even joyful, but behind closed doors, those closest to her described a tension, a guardedness, as if every detail was being curated. The insiders themselves were often unsure what to believe, caught between personal observations and the narratives being fed to the media. One close family friend described moments when Meghan would discuss her experiences ambiguously, offering hints but never full confirmation. These conversations were described as emotionally charged, sometimes evasive, sometimes revealing, but always leaving a sense of uncertainty. Friends recall being told, "I can't talk about it fully," or being redirected with humor, charm, or subtle deflection. It was a pattern that left observers guessing, straining to reconcile the warmth of these interactions with the glaring absences in documentation. staff members, and personal aides added another layer to the story. They reported instances where schedules, appointments, and travel plans appeared to be manipulated in ways that were inconsistent with a typical pregnancy. Certain engagements were canceled or postponed at short notice, while others continued without apparent concern for the physical realities one would expect. These accounts hint at a life under constant scrutiny, carefully staged appearances, and meticulous control of perception. The narrative being constructed for public consumption was precise, yet internally, it did not always match the truth. One insider, speaking under the condition of anonymity, revealed details about medical appointments that never aligned with public statements. There were checkups that were mentioned publicly, the source said, but in reality, the timing was off. Some visits may not have even happened. It was confusing, and even those of us close to her couldn't piece it together. This statement alone challenges the credibility of the publicly presented timeline and underscores a recurring theme. What the world observed may have been an elaborate performance rather than lived reality. Even close relatives added to the contradictions. Doria, Meghan's mother, reportedly expressed frustration at being drawn into a narrative she had no control over. She observed inconsistencies and discrepancies that troubled her, noting moments when the public perception diverged sharply from her private understanding. Insiders describe her as conflicted, loyal to her daughter, protective, yet increasingly aware of gaps, omissions, and contradictions that could not be ignored. It was in this environment of tension and observation that Doria's private confession finally emerged, a revelation that would reshape the story entirely. Friends and former colleagues also noticed something peculiar about Meghan's behavior. During the period in question, some observed what they interpreted as an attempt to maintain appearances at all costs. There were clothing choices that concealed or exaggerated certain physical attributes, public engagements that seemed overly staged, and comments that hinted at personal struggles without offering clarity. These insiders, speaking candidly, described a woman attempting to navigate an impossible environment, where every gesture, word, and appearance was scrutinized, while simultaneously managing an intimate, highly sensitive aspect of her life. The inconsistencies noted by insiders extended to social media interactions as well. Friends reported that certain posts appeared deliberately vague, sometimes implying milestones or experiences that could not be independently verified. Comments and captions were carefully constructed, often playful or deflective, yet leaving hints that something more complex was happening behind the scenes. This selective visibility contributed to a public narrative that seemed cohesive but, according to insiders, was far from complete. Interestingly, some insiders suggested that the secrecy may have been mutual. Meghan's inner circle, including friends and staff, were reportedly instructed to maintain discretion at all times. There was a pervasive understanding that revealing too much could have consequences, both personal and public. Yet, even within this tightly controlled network, contradictions surfaced. Different individuals recalled different details, some emphasizing subtle signs that a pregnancy existed, while others maintained that no such evidence could be observed. These divergent accounts created an environment of constant uncertainty, feeding speculation and intrigue. One particularly revealing account came from a former aide who described conversations with Meghan about her health and lifestyle during the period in question. The aide noted that Meghan often spoke cryptically, referencing appointments, dietary adjustments, and routines in a way that seemed to confirm a pregnancy superficially, but lacked any concrete detail that could be verified. She would allude to things, the aide recalled, but never give specifics. It was almost as if she knew people were watching and wanted them to see what they expected to see. This account hints at a deliberate shaping of perception, a subtle orchestration that blurred the line between reality and presentation. Insider revelations also highlighted the pressures of public expectation. Meghan, by this point, was no longer simply a private individual. She was a public figure, married into the British royal family, and under constant media surveillance. Every move was catalogued, every statement dissected. Insiders described an environment where appearances were essential, yet authenticity was perilously constrained. This tension, between living authentically and performing for an audience, may have influenced the narrative surrounding the pregnancy, contributing to the inconsistencies, gaps, and contradictions noted by those closest to her. Family dynamics played a critical role as well. Doria Ragland, while supportive, reportedly struggled with the need to protect her daughter's image while grappling with inconsistencies she observed personally. Extended family members expressed similar frustrations, noting moments when public statements did not align with private knowledge. The insiders' collective accounts reveal a family navigating extraordinary circumstances, caught between loyalty, secrecy, and the demands of life lived under relentless scrutiny. What makes these insider revelations particularly compelling is the specificity of some details. Names, locations, conversations, and behaviors are cited repeatedly, adding credibility to accounts that might otherwise be dismissed as rumor. Observers note how these details, when cross-referenced with public events and known timelines, often reveal subtle but significant contradictions. Each revelation becomes a piece of the puzzle, drawing the audience deeper into the mystery and fueling curiosity about what really occurred. The insiders' testimonies also underscore the human element, the emotions, fears, and moral dilemmas that colored every interaction. Some expressed guilt for keeping silent, others frustration at the inconsistencies they observed, and still others a sense of helplessness at the inability to reconcile private knowledge with public narratives. This emotional complexity adds depth to the story, transforming it from a simple mystery into a dramatic exploration of loyalty, secrecy, and the costs of public life. And then there were the whispers of corroboration. Some insiders hinted that other evidence existed, records or communications that could potentially clarify the timeline or confirm suspicions, but these were never produced publicly. Instead, they served to deepen intrigue, suggesting that what the public has seen is only a fraction of a much larger, more complex story. The effect is magnetic. Audiences are drawn into speculation, trying to piece together the fragments of truth from the accounts of those closest to the events. As these insider revelations accumulate, a pattern emerges. They paint a picture of a carefully managed narrative, one in which public appearances, media coverage, and private behavior were all aligned to maintain a specific story. Yet behind the facade, contradictions, absences, and emotional tensions suggest that reality may have been far more complicated and far more fragile than anyone publicly admitted. By the end of these revelations, it becomes clear that the story of Meghan's first pregnancy is not just about a missing birth or absent documentation. It is about perception, control, loyalty, and secrecy. It is about how families navigate extraordinary circumstances, how public figures manage scrutiny, and how the truth can be obscured by both intention and circumstance. The insiders provide not only confirmation of inconsistencies, but also context, showing why events unfolded as they did, why gaps existed, and why the narrative presented to the public may have diverged so sharply from reality. But just when the insider accounts seemed to clarify some details, new contradictions emerged. Statements that directly challenged previously given testimonies, photos that seemed to undermine insider recollections, and public events that no one could reconcile with the private knowledge being shared. And what came next would push the story into an entirely new realm of complexity, leaving everyone, family, friends, and the world at large, questioning everything they thought they knew. Headlines don't always tell the truth. In the case of Meghan Markle's alleged first pregnancy, the media's portrayal of events became a powerful force, shaping public perception while obscuring inconvenient realities. From glossy magazine spreads to viral online articles, every report contributed to a narrative that, on the surface, seemed seamless and verifiable, but beneath it, cracks were forming. The story of a pregnancy, which should have been straightforward, was transformed into a complex interplay between appearance, speculation, and strategic silence. The first layer of media deception lies in the timing and framing of announcements. Press releases, celebrity news articles, and social media posts all created a sense of immediacy and authenticity. Outlets reported on supposed milestones, changes in appearance, and personal insights allegedly shared by friends or unnamed sources. Each article, each tweet, each headline reinforced a single, coherent narrative. Meghan was pregnant, progressing through her first pregnancy, and preparing for motherhood. But insiders would later reveal that many of these stories were based on perception, hearsay, or selective information, carefully orchestrated to appear factual while leaving critical gaps unaddressed. Consider the power of repetition. When multiple outlets report the same information, audiences naturally assume that the facts are confirmed. Yet in this case, repetition often masked ambiguity. Sources cited in articles were sometimes vague, unnamed, or inconsistent. Quotes were selectively edited, photographs interpreted in ways that suggested stages of pregnancy that may not have existed, and timelines presented as certain even when evidence was lacking. This created a sense of collective validation. Everyone saw the same story, so it must be true, but the underlying truth was far murkier. Visual media also played a crucial role in shaping perception. Paparazzi photos, official event images, and social media snapshots were analyzed endlessly by fans, journalists, and commentators. Every outfit choice, every pose, every angle was scrutinized for signs of pregnancy. Yet insiders noted that clothing, posture, and even photographic framing could create illusions of progression or concealment. In other words, what the public interpreted as confirmation of pregnancy may have been carefully managed appearances designed to satisfy expectation rather than reflect reality. The result was a media landscape in which illusion and fact were almost indistinguishable. Humor and irony were not absent in this media game. Tabloids often exaggerated stories, creating sensational headlines that amplified curiosity and sometimes ridicule. Headlines proclaimed milestones that insiders claim were inaccurate or misleading. Social media discussions oscillated between adoration, speculation, and mockery. Memes, fan theories, and viral commentary added a layer of cultural reinforcement, embedding the narrative deeper into public consciousness even as factual verification remained elusive. In essence, the media became both a magnifying glass and a distortion tool, clarifying some details while simultaneously obscuring the truth. The media's influence extended beyond narrative shaping. It also affected the people closest to Meghan. Family members, aides, and friends were acutely aware that every move could be scrutinized and misinterpreted. Insiders described an environment in which discretion was paramount, yet complete control was impossible. Even casual appearances risked creating new stories, rumors, or misrepresentations. This constant pressure amplified the stakes of secrecy, making it easier to see why certain inconsistencies in timelines, appearances, and statements persisted. The media, intentionally or not, had created a system in which reality itself was negotiable. Public perception, fueled by media coverage, played a parallel role in constructing the story. Audiences, conditioned to trust celebrity reporting, accepted the narrative at face value. Friends' statements, magazine photos, and social media updates were interpreted as confirming the pregnancy. Yet insiders later revealed that these same cues were sometimes misrepresentative, designed to satisfy expectation rather than communicate truth. The result was a feedback loop. Media amplified perception, perception validated media, and reality became increasingly opaque. Even investigative reporting was affected. Journalists seeking to verify the pregnancy encountered obstacles, from non-existent records to contradictory statements. Requests for hospital documentation reportedly returned nothing, and interviews with close acquaintances yielded conflicting testimonies. The media had created a veneer of verification, a network of stories and images that seemed corroborated, but under scrutiny, the foundation was unstable. These gaps allowed the narrative to persist without meaningful challenge, reinforcing public belief even as insiders questioned the truth. The role of strategic silence cannot be overstated. Certain details were deliberately withheld or vague, both by those managing Meghan's public image and by her inner circle. Official statements avoided specifics, social media posts were carefully curated, and ambiguous language in interviews allowed plausible deniability. This deliberate withholding of information created space for speculation while maintaining control over the narrative. In this sense, silence became a tool of deception, as effective as misdirection in shaping perception. It's important to note that this is not unique to Meghan Markle. Media and public deception occur regularly in celebrity culture. But the stakes in this case were unusually high. As a member of the royal family, even indirectly, Meghan's life attracted global attention. Every personal milestone was scrutinized for both authenticity and symbolism. A pregnancy, expected to be verifiable, became instead a battleground of perception, misinformation, and controlled revelation. The absence of clear evidence made the deception, or perceived deception, even more compelling. Direct contradictions between media reports and insider accounts only heightened the intrigue. For instance, certain milestones reported in publications, appointments, symptoms, or even anecdotes of daily life, were later disputed by those who claimed to be present. These contradictions fueled doubt, inviting readers and viewers to question what was real, what was fabricated, and what was left unspoken. Every new article, every leaked detail, became a piece of the puzzle, but the overall picture remained elusive. The emotional effect on the public was profound. Many fans experienced a roller coaster of hope, admiration, and confusion. Some celebrated milestones that may never have occurred, while others speculated about hidden truths. The mixture of excitement, skepticism, and uncertainty kept audiences engaged, driving discussion, debate, and obsession. In this sense, the media did more than report. It amplified curiosity, intensified emotional investment, and created a sustained narrative tension that would carry through every subsequent chapter of the story. Even more intriguing is the interplay between media, insiders, and public reaction. Media reports influenced insiders' decisions about what to reveal and when, while insiders' disclosures shaped media narratives in turn. Public discussion, online forums, and social media commentary further complicated the picture, generating pressure for clarification while simultaneously muddying the waters. The vanishing pregnancy became a phenomenon not only of missing evidence, but of information manipulation, perception management, and collective interpretation, a story where truth was continually negotiated rather than fixed. And yet, despite all the articles, interviews, and photographs, the gaps remained. No hospital record, no verifiable proof, no concrete confirmation of a birth existed in the public domain. The narrative was maintained through appearance, repetition, and selective revelation. The media's role in perpetuating belief without verification became a central pillar of the story, demonstrating the power of perception in a world where documentation is expected to provide certainty, but often fails to do so. By the end of this chapter, the media and public deception are revealed as integral to the mystery. Without them, the vanishing pregnancy might have been just an internal family curiosity. With them, it became a global puzzle, a story that engages billions of viewers and readers with suspense, contradiction, and unanswered questions. The media did not create the events themselves, but it amplified, distorted, and perpetuated the perception of a story that was never fully transparent. But just when it seemed the media narrative had solidified, new contradictions appeared. Images, statements, and insider leaks that directly undermined the carefully curated public story. And what came next would force the world to confront the possibility that even the most verified reports could be entirely misleading, leaving everyone questioning what they thought they knew. Every confession has a reason. Every revelation, especially one as explosive as Doria Ragland's admission regarding Meghan Markle's alleged first pregnancy, carries an underlying motive. Layers of intent shaped by emotion, loyalty, and circumstance. To understand the impact of Doria's statements, we must ask a difficult question. Why now? Why speak out after years of silence? What compelled a mother, herself accustomed to privacy and discretion, to reveal a truth that could shake the world's perception of her daughter? The first layer of motive is protection. Doria has always been a steadfast presence in Meghan's life, a calming influence in the whirlwind of fame and scrutiny. According to insiders, one driving force behind her confession was a desire to shield her daughter from misconceptions and narratives that could harm her. By acknowledging inconsistencies regarding the first pregnancy, Doria sought to control the story from within, providing context, nuance, and personal perspective before speculation ran unchecked. Her intent, according to those close to her, was not to attack or expose, but to clarify, even if the truth was uncomfortable. Closely tied to protection is a sense of moral responsibility. Doria reportedly felt that the truth had reached a point where silence was no longer tenable. She was aware of the growing curiosity, the emerging contradictions, and the scrutiny from media and public alike. To remain silent might have allowed rumors to harden into perceived fact, unfairly shaping public opinion about Meghan's life. By speaking, even selectively, Doria aimed to insert a level of authenticity into a story dominated by speculation and controlled narratives. She reportedly wrestled with the emotional weight of this decision, understanding that revealing inconsistencies would inevitably spark controversy. Another potential motive is the desire for familial honesty. Families often navigate unspoken truths, tensions, and secrets, but when those secrets intersect with global attention, the stakes are exponentially higher. Insiders suggest that Doria's confession was also about reconciling private understanding with public perception, aligning family memory with reality, and attempting to prevent further distortion. She was confronting not just the absence of records, but the complex interplay between loyalty, truth, and perception that had burdened her for years. The act of confessing became a form of moral alignment, a way to bridge the gap between the family's lived experience and the narrative projected to the world. Strategic timing cannot be ignored. Sources indicate that Doria's revelation coincided with renewed media attention on Meghan's early life and family relationships. New biographies, interviews, and documentaries created a context in which her statements would resonate widely, ensuring that the confession would not be lost in the noise. By speaking during a period of heightened curiosity, Doria amplified the impact of her words, ensuring that the narrative would reach both traditional media and social media audiences. This strategic timing underscores a deliberate awareness of how and when information is most powerful.